Welcome to current day gutter journalism, folks, where low quality uni grads can hide behind the shield of opinion pieces in order to patronise a majority demographic, and smugly opine on how it's actually a good thing that a once popular TV show has now lost its core audience base because, checks notes, it was never actually made for them in the first place. A so-called entertainment reporter, and complete with an exotic name what no fucker can attempt to pronounce without inevitably being accused of some sort of hate crime, immediately shows her bias in the opening paragraph, writing, "From the moment I saw Ncuti Gatwa dancing the night away in a bright outfit during the 2023 Christmas special, I knew I would fall in love with this iteration of the Doctor." Yeah, because who hasn't always dreamed of seeing the iconic British time-travelling space alien prance around in a skirt in the middle of a gay club? I'm sure that was the top of the list for the OG writers back in the 60s, but alas, society was just too intolerant of homosexual kilt-wearing black Rwandan Scots to dare put such a thing on screen back then.
Shame.
So she goes on to say, not everyone was as excited by such an unapologetically queer black Doctor Who though. A vocal contingent of keyboard warriors took to social media to claim the show had gone too woke. From arguing that the show has been torn apart by woke ideologues to creating their own social media trend, #RIP Doctor Who, you don't need to go far to find the litany of tired complaints. But I'd argue that the show has always been socially progressive and inclusive. Not that I know what unapologetically queer is supposed to mean, but as an unapologetic straight white honky fella, I think I probably come under this umbrella of, quote, vocal contingent of keyboard warrior, complaining of the social cancer of wokeness that's infecting and poisoning the current cultural landscape. And so in my defence, love, I'm not sure how you can really argue that the show hasn't been torn apart by woke ideologues when they've abandoned any attempt at reflecting historical realism and in favour of box-ticking false realities and shallow virtue signalling, which simply results in eye-rolling face-palming and the sight of a black Isaac Newton.
What a fucking liberty!
I mean, even the old showrunner once confessed in an interview that they have to cheat and, quote, tell a lie when it comes to showing more black people in history, because there simply weren't as many about back then, but we still need to put them on screen because reasons. So clearly, the BBC and its woke minions are more interested in framing a false reality for the purposes of social engineering. And in my book, those who attempt to rewrite history for ideological narratives and political agendas never really turn out to be the good guys, weirdly. Apparently, this bird also says that she only started watching the 60-plus-year-old show back when current-day trans cultist David Tennant started playing the Doc, and how she immediately fell in love with the beautiful themes of found family combined with the captivating space and time adventures, and, quote, I never looked back. Okay, so how on earth can you say that Doctor Who was always woke and inclusive if you've never even watched a classic series? I don't remember old Billy Hartnell, for example, twirling about in a kilt. And in fact, even most critics on the left say his original era was problematic, given they reckon the actor was flat out racist, was a right-raging sexist because he once threatened to spank his granddaughter Susan that one time, and also straight up abducted Barbara and Ian for shits and giggles. And further doubling down on her nonsense, she goes on to say that for a show so versatile and with fluidity so naturally imbued in its bones, it's truly baffling that a non-straight, non-white Doctor feels so unbelievable to so many people. Well, maybe it's because this show and character has existed for 60 plus years prior to this chap, and not once in its 6 decades on air has the Doctor been any of those things. Or at least not a fragrantly camp, gender-bending twirly. I mean, can you imagine Hartnell calling people babes? Yikes. So clearly, the character has now been proactively changed from his recognisable roots and totally divested from his origins. And rather bloody literally in Season 12's lore-obliterating Timeless Child arc. And all for what? Certainly not story or organic narrative, but simply to pander to the disciples of the current-day new orthodox religion of wokeness. She continues, Ncuti's predecessor Jodie Whittaker battled intense public scrutiny as the first woman to take over the beloved role. Angry viewers similarly accused the show of pandering to woke times, causing Jodie to tell the press that it's terrifying that a woman being given a particular job can cause so much rage. And now Ncuti has been forced to justify his place in the sci-fi series ever since news of his casting in May 2022. Well yes, love. I think they should have to justify why an iconic British character who's been firmly established as a straight white male for over 6 decades has now been race and gender swapped, also because reasons. Those who are arbitrarily making such drastic changes to the core fabric of the programme should, in my opinion, be made to account for their motives in doing so. And that's not really too much to ask for when we're witnessing the subversion and dismantling of our cultural legacies by unhinged activists and totally captured media institutions. Now calling out straight white bigots and using all the predictable ist-phobes and isms, the journal goes on to argue that the reboot's rich and ever-evolving history of multiculturalism and LGBTQ+ inclusion has always been a part of the show, bro. I guess like when that big-eared Northern Doctor once got sexually molested by Captain Jack when he forcibly snogged him in happy relief at not being deaded that one time. And also because, checks notes again, Rose's mum was on the dole or some shit. Difference is, love, that the progressive messages were subtle back then and skillfully weaved into the background of the narratives, never predominantly allowing the ideology to trump or get in the way of the prevailing story. Nowadays, though, we have to put up with Jodie Whittaker delivering a preachy lecture about the dangers of naughty climate change deniers, and an entire ending sequence forcibly trying to cram a trans allegory into the narrative's conclusion, whilst also lecturing us about the importance of asking for and respecting alien bloody pronouns to boot.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the me.
Oh, I do that.
What?
To argue that this was always a part of the show is downright ludicrous. Doctor Who was always progressive with a left-wing bent, sure, but it was never woke, and there is a difference. Anyway, she then waffles on about how Martha and other characters of colour and queerness have been included and treated over the years. But honestly, Martha, and to some extent Bill and Mickey, were the only ones who really felt like actual characters. The rest just seemed to be forced cardboard stand-ins for diversity quotas, and whatever the heck Danny Pink was supposed to be. And the less said about the most ham-fisted, cringe-inducing first Asian master with zero acting skills, the better.
You suck.
And hilariously, after spending the entire article saying Doctor Who was always black and gay, she then does a full 180 and says actually there's not enough black or gayness in the show after all, because the upcoming season only features one episode from female screenwriters and none from writers of colour. And there's also yet to be a modern era showrunner who isn't a white man. Kyah! Make up your bloody mind, love. Honestly, these bitter wokies are never happy, are they? Ultimately, this article is just an excuse to spew vile hatred toward the one demographic in society that they can totally get away with denigrating. And yep, you guessed it folks, straight white Caucasian fellas. And bonus points if you're a Christian or once enjoyed the works of Graham Linehan. Guarantee the Metro would never dare consider publishing an article that talked this way about minority audience demographics for any other show. But of course, it's totally fair game for the honkies, gammons and so-called reactionaries who just don't want to see their national and multi-generational spanning icons subverted and destroyed by new wave culture commies. There's something in Doctor Who for everyone, not just a few, she has the gall to state. So while the haters continue shouting into the void about the identity of a fictional alien, I'll be switching on every Saturday night to see the human race celebrated in all its glory. And if someone has a problem with that, they know where the door is. You know, call me crazy, but I would say that the show should probably cater to the majority rather than the minority. Given gays and ethnics make up just under 20% of the UK as a whole, should the BBC and showmakers not be serving content to the silent majority rather than pandering to the vocal minority? Especially given that we are the ones who have traditionally funded all this via licence fees for decades and kept the show alive through the wilderness years. Oh, whatevs. The title alone from this smarmy do-gooding Gen Zer is editorially goading and shamelessly inflammatory. And pretty pathetic and rather tragic, really. As these shock-jock legacy media access shields can only attract clicks via the same old hate-filled hit pieces directed toward their true ideological enemies. The common man. Which is why the ratings have completely tanked since wokeness infected the programme circa 2018. Oh, and apparently, these cowards secretly edited their original headline from Doctor Who was never made for you to include the word just in the middle of it after getting so roasted online. But luckily, the internet is forever, girl. Even if you have caused your entire employment company and a national newspaper to nuke their entire Twitter account in response.
Oh, that's gotta hurt!
Well, I for one won't miss being lectured to every week and having to witness the hollow husk of what this show has sadly become. If people really truly want to watch a queer black doctor gallivant about the universe with a sonic tampon and no trousers for some reason, then just bloody let them. I'll be over here with my old DVDs on physical media and rewatching an era where the writers didn't actively outright hate me and actually bothered to write stories with a primary purpose of entertaining rather than indoctrinating.